Good evening, everybody. This is Mixology with Nicole, and she'll be making a couple drinks with us tonight. She's going to tell you all about those and how to do this at home for yourself. So hopefully you're bouncing around your pad there, enjoying yourself. You got yourself some things to mix, and you'll be able to do some of this on your own. So welcome, Nicole. Thanks for being here.
Hello, thank you for having me. All right, guys, so I will kick it off and we'll get straight to it, okay? So my name, like he said, is Nicole Dearing. I have been a bar manager and a brand ambassador for several local distilleries around the city. Very passionate about Kansas City, and so that's how I eventually got hooked up with Gibbs Road. I was the bar manager at Webster House, or at Freshwater when I found them, so I'm very passionate about local ingredients, using them authentically, using them as they should be. And I have been into mixing cocktails for almost 10 years now. So I love what I do. I love cocktails. I love what Gibbs Road does. Very passionate about their passion, and they are excellent at finding people around the city that are good at what they do and passionate about why they do it. So what we're going to be learning about tonight, I know that the world has kind of changed a little bit this year. And so I love how they've creatively kind of come up with a way to do cocktails at home. But that has always been a passion of mine. I actually was an educator before I was into cocktails. I was an English teacher. So I love teaching people how to make drinks. I love making them simple for you guys and making them easy to do at home. I'm not a fan of overcomplicating and hiding recipes and making it inaccessible. I'm very into, I will tell you exactly how I do stuff and how to make it as easy as possible at home. So I'm going to show you guys how to make a couple of awesome cocktails using all local ingredients. You're more than welcome to ask us some questions on the Q&A. I'll take a peek at that every once in a while and see if I can answer any of your specific questions. But we're going to keep it kind of broad, and I'm going to show you guys some really basic stuff on how to mix cocktails and some really big rules of thumb to kind of learn about. And then if you guys have any questions, just feel free to send those to us or to contact me after this, and I will absolutely answer those questions for you. So I'll get down to the cocktails that we're going to be making tonight. There are two of them. We've got a kind of a take on a margarita, if you will. I wanted to use a local spirit that maybe not everyone was as familiar with. Kansas City has a big reputation for whiskey and gin and vodka, but I wanted to give a shout out to a very specific local brand that I love working with. It's going to be Mean Mule's Agave Spirit. It's actually one of the only riffs on like tequila that we have in the Midwest, so it's very special, and I don't think it gets enough attention. So I wanted to use that in one of my cocktails. So it's kind of a take on a margarita, but we're using some really fun local artisanal syrups. I cannot talk these guys up enough. This is Boozy Botanicals 3-pepper syrup. They are the only company, local company, that I use when I don't make syrups myself. They are my go-to. I absolutely love them. They come in really cool bottles that I like to peel and reuse, very artisanal looking. Great for obviously the holidays coming around this time. They're great gifts, but I love mixing with them. It does say 3-pepper. It's not too spicy though. I think some people might be a little afraid of that when I pull that up from my home bar. It's not spicy at all. It's just going to give a little tiny bit of heat to it. I'll also be using in that cocktail, I'm not a big fan of sweet and sour mix. I don't like it. It's hard to find sweet and sour mix that is authentic, that is local, that is real ingredients. So I either make my own or I use Somerset Ridge's Citron. This is going to be kind of a local take on limoncello, which is super hard to find anywhere else. And it's not too sweet. So I like that about this product. So we're going to be using some of those to make kind of a riff off a margarita. But before we dive into that first cocktail, I'm going to give you guys some basic rules of thumbs. A lot of mistakes that I see a lot of amateur or first starting out bartenders make. And we're going to kind of debunk those and make sure that you don't make those mistakes at home. So one of those things is going to be when to shake a cocktail and when to not. That's really important because both of the cocktails that we're going to be making tonight, we're going to shake. In terms of equipment, we've got one cocktail shaker. This is more of an industry cocktail shaker that you'll see at a lot of bars. It's got 2 tins. But there are ones that I see a lot of home bartenders use, the one with the tops with the lids. You're more than welcome to use whatever method you prefer. But the importance of shaking, the reason that we do shake in a bar is when there is an acid agent introduced. And by acid, I mean something citrusy. So lemon juice or lime juice. If you see that in a cocktail recipe, odds are you're going to want to shake it. What that does is chemically react with the ingredients that are inside of the cocktail, and it dilutes it enough so that you're not just getting one gulp of straight lemon juice. That's not really fun in the cocktail. You want to make sure everything is mixed properly, and you're going to want to dilute the alcohol while releasing the chemical reaction within the acid. So we are going to shake both cocktails tonight. So we've got a little shaker that I've got there. Another important ingredient that a lot of home bartenders don't always have is going to be a jigger. A jigger is used to measure either alcohol, lemon juice, or simple syrup. So we've got a little jigger here, but you're more than welcome to use a teaspoon, tablespoon, whatever you've got. In this day and age with the internet, it's super easy I do this all the time, even behind the bar. Google convert milliliters to ounces or tablespoons to ounces. Super easy to do. The most common measurement you're going to see is going to be an ounce. So that's why you're just going to translate that to an ounce, and that's the measurement that I had. I did see a question pop through on what do I do if I don't have a shaker. It's not a huge problem. We are going to, I can show you kind of how to build it in, or you can put it in a cup. The most important thing to do is to somehow mix that cocktail before you add the ice. So I'll even follow along with you. How about that? And I'll put a cup up here, and you're going to add those ingredients in the cup. And as long as they're in there before that ice is introduced, we can now throw ice in there, and you can even just take your hand. We'll go super simple and stir it around. As long as there's some sort of agitation, then we'll make it work. This is obviously the best agitator to be able to shake a cocktail at home, but I will make it right along with you. We'll do two versions, one in the shaker and one in this glass here, and then we can work on it together. I won't even use a bar spoon. We're just going to kind of shake it around and then strain it. So you will need something to strain it with. I'm going to follow right along with you in case you don't have a strainer. So I've got a plastic cup here, and I'm going to take it and strain it with the plastic cup. We'll go super simple. That way I'm following along right along with you. How does that sound? Okay. So we talked about shaking. Now that we're on the subject of acid, when you're adding a citrus to any cocktail, a great rule of thumb of making cocktails at home is make sure that the acid balances with the sweetness. I am a huge advocate for I will drink anything as long as it's balanced. So next to spirits and your mixers, acid to sugar is the most important thing that you can mix with. A basic rule of thumb is start the cocktail at equal proportions. If it's an ounce of citrus, you're going to want an ounce of some sweetening agent, whether that's an awesome syrup that's already been made for you, a simple syrup that you make at home. You're just going to want to make sure that those are going to be balanced. I have an extremely dry palate, so when I'm making a recipe, I will usually mix the cocktail and end up wanting it a little drier, so I'll add a little more citrus. But you're going to want to start equal parts. And if you guys at home that are making the cocktails, you taste it and you're like, I want that a little sweeter. It's awesome to just add a little more sweetness. You want it a little drier, add a little more acid. But we're going to start at one ounce. This recipe is a little different, and I'll explain why. And it's because of the sweet and sour mix that we're using is not very sweet. It's more acidic than anything because it's made with brandy, blend of white wine, and some lemon. So it's pretty acidic. It's got a nice punch to it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get down to it. So we're going to get down to mixing a cocktail. Like I said, we're going to do two different versions of this. So I'm going to do one in a shaker for those of you that have cocktail shakers at home. This is a mixing glass, but you can throw it into any glass that you have lying around. It's not a problem at all. So we're going to do it twice. We're going to do it one in the shaker, one in the mixed drink, okay? So the proportions that we're going to be working with, and I saw that Google Doc go through, I have every instruction and proportion written out, but I'm going to say it verbally just so that we can follow along at home very easily. So we're going to do 2 ounces of the Mino agave spirit. So we'll just go one at a time, make sure we get that. I've got the jigger. You guys can use whatever you want at home to equate 2 ounces. All right, so we've got our base spirit in. A classic cocktail proportion, and I'm talking when they made them in the 1800s, 1900s, is 2-1-1. That's a very good base point to start with, and that's going to be 2 proportions, 2 fingers, 2 ounces, whatever it may be, of spirit, 1 ounce of acid, 1 ounce of sugar. If you start with that, you could kind of make up any recipe you want, and it's going to taste very well balanced. So we're going to go 2, 1, 1. In this, we've got 1 ounce of the 3-pepper syrup. So we've got 2, 1. And now we're going to do 1 of our acid. Our acid in this cocktail is going to be lime juice. So I've got a lime here. I wanted to do every step with you guys so you can kind of see what I do. I'm just cutting this in half. This is a citrus juicer. You can find them really anywhere. Any craft bartending store is going to have them, any liquor store. But I've even found them at Sunfresh before. You can find them in a grocery store because they are commonly used for cooking. So I'm going to put it in this, and I'm going to squeeze it. If you didn't have one of these around, you're more than welcome to. My trick is to cut that half into quarters so that it's pinchable, and just pinch it right into the jigger. So I'm actually going to show you guys each way since we're already making 2 versions of the cocktails. So this is the easiest way to control that acid and get as much lime juice out of there as possible. And that was actually perfect. That came out to 1 ounce. So that's going in here. And then if you don't have a citrus juicer, I'm going to take the half and quarter it. So just cut it in half again. And it's pretty easy to grab that wedge and just spray it into the jigger or whatever measuring device you have at home. So that's going in here. All right. So next we are going to put the Somerset Citron. The reason that I wanted this in that cocktail is, like I said, it has a really nice acidic punch. So we've already reached our perfect balance. I have made this cocktail before, so that's why I know that adding kind of a wild card is okay. And what I like about starting with a super simple cocktail is you can kind of make it your own from here on out as you will. So we've got a 2-1-1 that I started with. And as I've been mixing this in the past, I'm like, I love citron. Let me throw a dash in there, and I loved it. So you can omit that if you want, but I think it's fantastic, even though it kind of breaks the rules of that 2-1-1 kind of proportion and formula. My rule in bartending is start with the proportion and then add things as you will, especially home bartending and especially during a global pandemic. It is a blast to start with a recipe online or from a friend and tweak it how you will. So this is my version of that tweaking after I've made this cocktail many times before. So this does taste phenomenal. We're going to do 3/4 ounce in this, but you can change and adjust how much you want to do after making it a couple times. That is a-okay. It also brings up the alcohol content, which, if we're being honest here, is kind of fun, especially during this time. So we have all of our ingredients in the cup and in the shaker. It is very, very important to add everything in before the ice. I see a lot of people who do home bartending and making something at home. They will add the ice and stack the ingredients on top. That's called building a cocktail. And the only time you want to do that is if you want a layered effect on purpose. So for example, if your ingredients are different colors and you're doing a themed cocktail and you want to see separation. If you're not clearly trying to achieve that purposeful coloring difference, don't ever put anything in a cup or a shaker before you put the ice in. So you're going to want to build it as it is. That way we're sure everything is mixed together and you're not going to take that gulp and get 1 gulp of one ingredient. So that's why if you don't have a shaker, the most important thing is just put it in there before you put the ice and it'll be just fine. All right, so we've got that in there. I did bring both of these molds over because I want to show you guys, even at home, having an advanced ice game is very simple. You can go to the gas station and grab bagged ice, no problem. I do it all the time when I don't want to do a little bit of work. But these silicone molds are amazing, and they're very easy and accessible to find. I think I found these 2 at World Market, and they're easy to just fill, keep in your freezer, and pop out whenever. It's a really easy way to elevate your cocktail game at home and impress your guests. So it's real fun to just be able to have this. And then I've got my ice. You don't need very much ice when you're mixing it. Both of these cocktails are going to start with no ice in the glass. You could add them if you wanted to keep it cold. But we're just going to make sure, most importantly, that the alcohol content gets diluted and everything is nice and cold before we put it in our glasses. So I'll show you the shaker first. Shaking can be pretty important, but it seems a lot harder than it is. All you're really looking for is wait until the tin gets, you know, pretty chilly. You're looking for dilution more importantly than chilling the cocktail. You want it to be palpable and well balanced, like we've been talking about. So I'm going to shake it, and I'll show you kind of roughly how long you're going to want to shake something, especially with acid. So you're just going to kind of shake it for a little bit. My rule of thumb is usually 10 seconds, no less. Okay, so the tin is cold. Once it starts to get a little uncomfortable, that's kind of a good sign when your hands are getting a little chilly there. And then, like I said, for those of you mixing at home without a cocktail shaker, this is A-okay. We just want to make sure that everything has been properly mixed, the chemistry is going on. Since we're not shaking it and diluting it as hard, I would maybe do this just a little bit longer just to make sure that it's going on here. And if you are using a shaker, one nice part about it, it's hard to see in the video, but you do have a frothing kind of going on. It's almost like using a milk frother in a latte. You do get a slightly different texture, but this is going to be just fine. I do encourage, if you don't have it at home and you want to kind of up your cocktail game, it's a good idea to go ahead and grab them. Locally, I mean, I've seen them all over the place. Most Gomers will carry them. I've seen them at World Market is a good spot, and Pride's in Westport is awesome. They've got tons of cocktail stuff. Okay, so that's going to be about ready. When making cocktails, I am a big advocate for taste, the whole process. If you taste it and it tastes like you want a little sweet, you know, maybe I taste this and it's not quite diluted enough because we didn't do the shaking, then absolutely go ahead and shake it a little more. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm kind of a cook like you don't follow a recipe kind of girl, and I love to just, when it reaches to where you're like, oh, that's awesome, then you're done, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and taste this. Tastes awesome. It's got, like I said, just a little bit of a spicy kick. It's not that syrup is not overpowering by any means. I'm a really dry palate, so I would even maybe add half an ounce more of that agave spirit. But that's me, and I love the taste of spirit. So we're gonna go ahead and put this in a glass because it tastes awesome. With a shaker, there's strainers that you can put and pour in, but we're gonna do the easier version, or maybe the most accessible version, I should say. And I am actually gonna strain this like we're using a cup with a little plastic cup here. So it's pretty easy to do. When you're straining something, all you're really doing is catching the ice. So we're just going to strain that in. And there's our cocktail. I am going to touch briefly on glassware. This is kind of, like I said, a margarita style cocktail. So I did go with this is called a coupe. But there are also martini glasses that you could use. This is a real common one that a lot of people have at home. I've seen a lot of people use margaritas for that because they're easy to rim with salt if you want to rim them. But the most important thing, some people do like margaritas on the rocks. I encourage you to try it without any ice in it first. Just because as you drink something and as that water is diluting, because we already pre-diluted it, it can throw off your flavors. It can make it start to appear much sweeter as it melts. So we're going to start with that. And then what I did for a garnish for this one, I don't know if this is just like a bartender thing, but I've commonly seen daiquiris. I used to go to the Rieger bar all the time. Daiquiris garnished with a pinch of nutmeg. And when I first heard that, I'm like, that's weird. I'll try it. Tried it. Haven't looked back since. So I'm a little weird, but it's kind of fun, especially in the fall. And especially because we used kind of just a little bit of a sweet, spicy aspect in our cocktail. A pinch of nutmeg tastes awesome in this drink. So I just, this is just from Trader Joe's, but you are more than welcome. My favorite thing ever is to get some nutmeg that's whole and just shave it in. So not everyone has a grater, so I just grabbed a shaker one. Common mistake I see at home, when people garnish with something powdered, whether it's cayenne pepper, nutmeg, cinnamon, they'll go like this and shake it in. And this is a cold cocktail now. So it won't mix very well if you just dash it on. It'll kind of explode everywhere and it'll be very overpowering. And you're going to drink it and kind of cough a little. It's very dry. So what I do, always rule of thumb, when you do powdered anything, is take your hand or a small plate pour it into that first, and then you're gonna pinch it. And I just pinch it kind of all around, and you'll notice because it's a cold cocktail, when it hits the surface, it'll kind of branch out like you're throwing bread in a pond feeding ducks. It just kind of explodes out. So a little goes a long way. Now I love nutmeg, and I like spice. I like complex flavors because I drink cocktails all the time. But I would just encourage, rule of thumb that I just said about cooking, try a little bit, taste it. You want more? It is so much easier to add more than to ruin the cocktail and start over. So just pinch a little bit, and then you're good to go. I've also found that powdered garnishes like that do really well at home. They're very aromatic. They kind of just elevate. That's why bars use them a lot. That's like if you have like a peel and you have a lighter and they do the flamed orange peel. That's a very simple cocktail to do in theory, but if you do it at home, it just blows people's minds. So to have a little bit of that and pinch over is perfect. So you guys go ahead and give that a whirl. Do keep in mind that nutmeg is a very, aromatic, intense flavor. So as you go in, it's going to smell kind of intense. And then when you taste it, it'll all kind of wrap and balance together. So go ahead and give that a whirl. And there is a lot going on in that cocktail. Why I wanted to do that cocktail is we only have 4 ingredients in that cocktail, and it tastes like there is just a universe of flavor going on there. All local, all simple, all purchasable, easy to do at home. Okay, so that's our first cocktail. We're gonna move on to the second. It's a lot of fun though. I like that one. Just a nice little heat, and it's perfect for fall. You get a little bit of spice, a little bit of allspice. It's great. So we're gonna move on to the next cocktail. This is actually one of my absolute favorite cocktails to make when entertaining literally anyone. I've made a cocktail like this for 500-person weddings. I've made them for really intimate, and we're probably not doing the big weddings right now, but really intimate gatherings in my home. And what I love about it is its basic structure. So this is going to be a riff, which is basically just an adaptation off of a very classic, very delicious cocktail, one of my favorites, called a French 75. A French 75 is a classic cocktail. It was around in the early 1900s, and it is made with gin. I'm going to call it our sugar agent, so we start getting that used to our head about balance. Sugar agent, acid agent, and champagne. So it's topped with champagne classically, but our goal here is local, local, local. So I am going to be actually topping it with a local cider. The one that I'm using, you guys can really use anything as long as it's dry. You're not going to want to use a sweet cider when mixing cocktails unless the recipe calls for it, because it's going to throw off our perfect 2-1-1 proportion. You're going to use something dry. A classic French 75 is going to use champagne, which is traditionally, especially in the early 1900s, bone dry. So I'm going to use a very, very dry local cider. This is actually one of my favorites. I have been mixing with it for years. This is going to be Somerset's Lucky Dog hard cider. This is one of my favorite ciders for a couple reasons. It is actually a yeast fermented cider. I know that's a big word, but basically that just means that it's made in the same style as champagne. So it's perfect for our cocktail, but any dry cider is going to work. I use, honestly, at home, because I don't want to open a giant 750 milliliter wine bottle of cider, I use the little cans, which is what I think you guys are working with. That's perfect, because I'll pop it, pour a little in my cocktail, pour a little by myself, and then I'm good. It's great. So we're going to use the cider that we're going to top with. We're going to use Lifted Spirits Gin, one of my favorites. We're going to use, and this is actually one of my favorites of boozy botanical syrups, we're going to use their Lavender Earl Grey syrup. I not only adore this syrup in a lot of cocktails that I've made before, but I absolutely love it in a French 75. Lavender and Earl Grey, otherwise known as bergamot, that flavor, pairs so well with gin because gin is juniper based. So all of these flavors, I'm doing a lot of the kind of work for you guys and giving you very simple ingredients to work with, but they have been masterfully paired and painstakingly paired together. So everything about all of these ingredients is supposed to mix very, very, it's creating an ecosystem with a lot of balanced flavors. We're also going to use a little bit of a local traminette. Traminette is just a fancy word for a local Gewürztraminer wine. I love, love, love mixing with wine. And the reason being, I like to use it as, think of it as an acid agent. Wine is made from grapes. Grapes are a fruit just like lemons, and you ferment them. So it's got some acidity to it. It's got a little bit of a kind of an acid kick to it. So I like to usually dial back citrus at home and put half an ounce, not very much, just a little bit of wine in there. That also makes it easy because finding citrus is not always the easiest thing to do, and juicing can be a pain sometimes. So if I'm making a punch, I usually use wine as my acid. Because French 75s traditionally have champagne topped on them, you've already got an acid agent in the cocktail. So I like to use a little bit of local wine. There's nothing wrong with that. In my proportions, I'll even taste it and throw a little bit more in, because why not? Wine is always good. So we're going to go ahead and build our cocktail. One important thing to note that's different than the other one, there is an ingredient that we are not going to put in our mixing glass before we alter that. There's a reason for it. This cider is going to be carbonated. And I know this seems so logical and kind of simple to think about, but I have seen some nasty accidents behind the bar where someone shook something carbonated in a shaker. Don't ever do that. Again, it seems so simple, but I've seen people do it. And a lot of people at home have the metal tin glass topper shaker. And if you shake something carbonated and go to separate that, it can explode and shatter glass everywhere. So I've seen it happen. It's happened to me before. Someone shattered one next to my face at a bar, and it's not fun. So don't ever do that. And there's no reason for it. It's going to heavily carbonate that cocktail and throw the chemistry off. So don't ever, if you're topping with soda, cider, champagne, don't ever, ever, ever shake with it. So we're going to put that to the side. Another thing to note about this cocktail, that champagne is cold because we're going to be topping with it. You want it to match the temperature of the drink that you've just made. Our wine that we're mixing with is room temperature. I have not chilled this. When you're mixing different ingredients together, keep in mind all these, some are alcoholic, some are non, some are high percentage, some are not. When you're trying to mix things together, you want to create a level enough playing field as possible. So you're going to want everything as close to the same temperature as possible. So we're going to keep this warm and the cider cold because we're going to top that when it's finished. Okay, so we're going to start building this. I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. So we're going to do a glass, just in case no one has a mixing glass at home. Mixing glass. I did the first drink a little differently because we were already dealing with some new stuff, but I want to introduce something new for you guys, a good little pro tip, especially at home. In a bar program, when you're making cocktails, a good rule of thumb is start with the smallest amount building your cocktail, the least expensive amount, and work your way up. In a bar program, the reason are profit margins. If someone starts building a cocktail and they start with the spirit first, and you accidentally throw the wrong ingredient in, or your proportions are off, then you've ruined the drink at its most expensive step. This is crucial at home because I'm actually in my home bar, and I can't tell you the money that I've spent building it up. And I'll go to the liquor store and buy stuff and try it. And if I mess it up, I'm like, that was $8 worth of awesome, ingredients that I just messed up, and I don't know how to salvage it. So the best thing to do is start with the least expensive and work your way up. Didn't want to throw too much at you guys at once, so we're doing that with our second cocktail. So that being said, we're going to start with our lowest ingredient amount. So we're going to start with half an ounce of that Somerset citron. That's going to be the smallest amount. So we're going to do half an ounce of that. Again, I'm going to mix in both the shaker and the mixing glass. This one will actually be really easy if you don't have a shaker at home, because when you add that cider at the end, it's going to create effervescence and bubbliness, and it's going to help kind of mix everything together. So it'll be a-okay. The next least expensive thing is going to be a syrup. So this is going to be the lavender or Earl Grey syrup that we're going to mix with next. So on this, we're going to do an ounce of that. It's actually a little high for me at home in terms of that balancing agent. I like things a little drier, but these syrups are so good. I don't mind adding a little bit more than I'm traditionally used to. They have a lot of flavor, and they are authentic, organic, local. So they've got a pretty powerful flavor kick there. All right, now we're going to do our lemon juice. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut it. Throwing it in our jigger to make sure the measurements are all correct. Little pro tip, this isn't a huge thing, but just so you guys know, when you're purchasing ingredients, lemons traditionally yield a lot less juice than limes. It's kind of hard to see, but they have a large amount of pith. So they have a lot of kind of rind around them. So I usually double the amount of lemons that I will buy when I'm buying for a cocktail than I do limes. So just a little thing for you guys when you're purchasing cocktails for home. Okay, so we have all of our least expensive stuff now. We're going to put the spirit in last. That's kind of a good rule of thumb, is just put the spirit in last. That way, in case we made a mistake, especially with like egg white cocktails, where you put an egg white in, let's say you mess up, well, the second you put the egg white in, it's ruined. You can't really salvage it, so you do that last. So it's kind of the, if you just think in your head, which one would really hurt to mess up at this point, mine would be losing the gin, so I'm going to do the gin last. A little bit of wine as well. Went out of order, that's what I get. But you know what's good about home bartending? It is what you make it. Just have some fun with it. So we're gonna put an ounce of this wine in. The reason I chose Traminette, it doesn't matter as much the brand that you choose, but Traminette is a very acidic grape, and I love acidity in my cocktails rather than sweetness. Again, you can adjust that how you will. If you like sweetness more, taste it, throw some more syrup in, that's cool. But I like Traminette because it's a very bright, very big, very acidic grape. So it's perfect for what I want it in that cocktail for. Okay, so we are all set now. Now we are going to shake it with the ice. Again, no champagne, no cider. Don't put anything carbonated in those. I will probably shake this just a little bit longer than I did on the last one. If you know the basics, it's very easy to, in your head, logically back it out. I'm shaking it longer because it has a lot of acid going on in there. There's wine, there's lemon juice, there's a lot going on in there. So I'm just shaking it up, making sure it's diluted enough. I also love foamy cocktails. Texture is a big thing for me. So I just want to make sure it's nice and shaken up. Now we're gonna do this little bad boy. And again, when we're using a little bit of an untraditional method, just taste it. As long as it tastes where you want it to be, that is the most important thing. I'm a big fan of punches, making punches at home. So if I have people over, I don't know about you guys, but maybe it's like if you're a fine dining chef, the last thing you want to do is cook and work after you get off work. So I just like to make punches. I will get a little bowl and add ingredients in. It's called batching, and just have it all in there. So you would never shake a punch, even though there's a little bit of acid in there. So you're just going to make sure everything has time to marinate. Think of it as throwing an acidity with meat. You just want to make sure that it has some time and a little bit of agitation to make sure that it gets there. So before I strain it, I'm going to taste it, make sure that it's where I want it to be. You guys make sure where it's where you want to be. So I'm actually going to shake that just a little more. But it tastes good. It just had quite a little gin punch there, so I'm going to dilute it a little bit more. And if you like the gin punch, go for it. if you want to taste the alcohol, that's the way to do it. Okay, so glassware on a French 75 is actually very important because it has something topped with it. You don't want ice in it because when you drink it, it's going to hit your face. It's got a lot of liquid in there. You'll notice we did a lot of volume on this cocktail, and that's common with a French 75. But a French 75 is a wine cocktail. It has wine in it. So I usually use, you'll see classically, especially if you go out and you're served French 75, it will be in a wine glass, a champagne glass, or I have this old school one that I wanted to use. It's one of my favorites. It's kind of a combo of the two. It's an old 1920s glass. So not everyone has vintage barware. I collect it, so I have a lot of them. But you'll notice from the shape, it's kind of both a wine glass and a champagne flute. So it's just fun. I like this one a lot. So we're going to strain from this one into here. You'll see that this glass was probably intended for a French 75 based on how much we got. You're going to have a little room to the top because we haven't added our cider yet. So that's where it is now. Before we add our cider, I've got something important that I want to talk about, and why I use the French 75 as one of my favorite go-to cocktails for entertaining multiple people. If you want to taste it by itself where it is now, so all going to do the same. So that's fantastic. But like I've mentioned, I have a very dry palate. I don't like sweet. So I judge how much of our dry agent we're going to put in based on where that cocktail's at now. If it's a little sweet and you're loving it, just add the tiny, just dollop a little cider on there. You don't need a lot, because what it's going to do is it's going to dry out the cocktail. If you're like me and you don't like a lot of sweetness, I put a little more cider on there. So this is why I love this for a party drink, is when you have a party, you're going to have some people that like sweet cocktails and some people that like dry. I just went to an employee gathering on Thursday night, and they wanted me to design a cocktail, and we had the cocktail batched. So just like this, and we put the champagne on the side. I was like, you know what? Let's let people decide how they want to drink this, right? So it's a really great cocktail to do for entertaining, or if you're married and one of you likes sweet cocktails, one of you likes dry, this can achieve whatever flavor palette you land on. So it's a phenomenal cocktail to make at home. So because I like a little bit drier, we can even do this in baby steps. I'm going to start with an ounce of cider and then taste how it is there. It's bright, it's acidic, I love it. I like dry, so I'll add another ounce and call it good. But again, the fun thing about making cocktails at home, be as selfish as you possibly can and let it land where you want. I designed both of these cocktails to be very adaptable. So that's where I want it. I'm going to show you guys a couple things you can do for garnish. Not everyone's going to have this at home, but I want to show you guys this as a resource because it's really cheap and it really elevates your bar game at home. This is called a channel knife, C-H-A-N-E-L, and it is used to take a piece of citrus, and you'll see bartenders, see that little spritz that's coming out? This is one of the cheapest things that you can get to just blow people's minds at home. You'll see them a lot at bartenders will do that for you, and you're like, oh, that's so amazing. How did you do that? This is maybe $5. This one's from cocktailkingdom.com. That's where I get a lot of my tools. But I've seen it at Pride's. I mentioned Pride's at Westport the other day. World Market has them. Amazon, anywhere. You can find them everywhere. $4. And this is my favorite French 75 garnish, is just to spritz a little on the top. Now, if you don't have one at home, which most people don't, I wanted to show you how much oil you get off of that, because we're going to kind of do the same thing with just a knife, right? So you're going to want to cut just a chunk of the rind only. So just kind of in a circular fashion. So I just cut this off of the edge of a lime. I'm using lime because it's a little easier to see than a lemon. You're going to want a lemon as a garnish, but green pops a little more. So we've got a little coin, not very thick. And when you spritz it, I'll do it get something dark so you guys can see it. You still get oil that sprays out. So if I'm entertaining someone at home, all you need is citrus, which we already used. So now we get to use this twice, which is a great thing to do, is to not waste. I just spritz it over that, and there's your garnish. And then when you go in, you're going to smell just all this amazing citrus oil that's been sprayed over the top of that. Okay, so cheers, guys. Those are our two cocktails. It's been a while since I looked at the questions, so pardon my arm, but I'm going to go through and tap and just make sure we didn't have any questions that I did not answer. But they also have my information if you guys have any questions, or if you want to play around with the cocktails and change them up a little, you're more than welcome to do that. One of my absolute favorite things to do is mess with the base spirit and infuse. Infusing is one of the cheapest things that you can do. You can infuse it with a number of herbs. We have so many local herbs that grow in Kansas and Missouri. I mean, I'm actually working on sounds weird, but I'm a weird palate. I'm working on a turnip cocktail right now. You can infuse it with anything. One of my favorite things is dandelions. Dandelions are edible, good for your gut health, and they make everything taste so floral and so amazing. That's why dandelions and, dandelion wine and dandelion tea were such a common thing on the Kansas side. So I actually have a little bit of it. I constantly have infusions going. So it's one of the easiest ways that you can take my recipe verbatim and just throw your own spin on it. It's really, really, really cheap to do as well. So I love infusing, and so many of these spirits and bottles of wine and bottles are cool shapes. So I'll throw some spirits in there and everyone's like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Or I'll put rosemary in something. And then when people arrive in my home, I'll uncap it, pour in a punch bowl, and it just blows people's minds. So it's really easy to just kind of get cheap ingredients and infuse them in a high quality local ingredient and kind of add your own flavor to it. I distill my own stuff. Trust me, it is no insult to any of these products to make them your own. That's kind of what they're designed for. That's what I, as a bar manager, have always loved to do. So it's a lot of fun. Feel free to reach out with questions or, post what you've been experimenting with, or let me know how you guys like them. But I cannot emphasize how awesome this organization is. I love working with them. They are good people. Thank you so much for your guys' support. If you guys have any questions, though, I can't emphasize enough how much I would love for you to reach out, and I will answer anything you want. I'm not turning you off. Just going to the Q&A, make sure I didn't miss any questions here. I like the gin and tonics comment. You are correct. Although that's actually a good point, guys. If you love classic cocktails, the more I've mixed cocktails, the more I really appreciate the simple stuff. Actually, my go-to when I go to a bar that doesn't have a craft program is a gin and soda. So one of my go-tos at home, gin and soda. I will infuse the gin, add a flavored soda if you want, and then there's a great cocktail. You can kind of elevate your cocktails that maybe you're already a little sick of. Play with the base spirit, infuse the base spirit, make it your own. One of my favorite things to do is just put orange peels in a bottle of gin, let it infuse for a couple of days, strain it, and then I make my orange, gin and sodas with that. So it's really easy to manipulate this. Take something that maybe you have deemed as boring or outdated, or hey, I'm sick of this, and infuse it and change it up completely. Now that we're getting into the colder weather, one of my favorite things to do is take whiskey, infuse it with something I have lying around or something fun, and make hot chocolate with it. There's a million things that you could do, or make tea with it. Hot toddies are a classic cocktail for a reason. Let me tell you what. Just play around with that base spirit and you instantly elevate whatever cocktail that you think is maybe a little overplayed and make it your own. And it's super fun to have stuff around that has those herbs in them. Sometimes I'll go around and be like, okay, what do I have that's about to go bad? I have some strawberries from Costco in the fridge that I completely forgot about. Throw them in a bottle. It saves the ingredient. You end up getting to make something fun with the cocktail. Strawberry gin and soda is amazing. There's all sorts of fun stuff that you guys can do with it. But that was a fun comment. I just wanted to address that you can absolutely take that. So I do have one that's, what's your favorite splurge tool? Are we talking like bar tools or something that maybe you want to kind of elevate your home bar with? That's what I'm assuming that's for. So I have a shaker that my fiance got me that's way too expensive. He got it from Cocktail Kingdom's Reserve collection. That's probably my personal favorite. Is that necessarily functional? No. So I'm going to give you more of like the best functional tool instead of the splurge tool. Although if you go on a lot of websites, they'll have whole kits now where you get the shaker and the jigger. I think the most important thing to have in home, even before a shaker, is going to be a jigger. What I've always loved about liquids, I cook with no recipe and I'm like, this needs a pinch of that here, a pinch of that there. I kind of just throw things in and taste it. With drinks, because they're liquefied, the smallest drop of a mistake can ruin your cocktail. And that just ruined a lot of time and a lot of money. So a jigger, some sort of measuring tool, is key to having a home bar. Can you mess around with it? Can you sub it out with something? You can. But when they're a $10 tool, that can absolutely change the way that you play around with cocktails, I think it's key. The best thing you can do for home bartending is play around and change things up. So the jigger would be, I think, the most important tool. And that would be kind of, rather than a splurge tool, I think if everyone had to have one tool in their arsenal, it would be the jigger. But excellent question. If you guys have anything else, feel free to reach out, and I am very accessible. I work at a vineyard now instead of a bar program, and I love it. So just reach out to me. Come on, drink wine, drink cocktails, support KC Farm School at Gibbs Road. I absolutely adore them. They could not be cooler.